He wasn't trying to be a hero. That idea would have made him chuckle, honestly. Marcus Reed was just a man, ordinary in every visible way, 46 years old, a school maintenance supervisor who clocked in early and stayed late without being asked. He had 2 daughters, a loyal old sedan with a cracked windshield, and a leather wallet held together by habit and tape. People who knew him described him as quiet, solid, one of the good ones. He wasn't flashy, didn't seek attention. His joy came from fixing broken faucets, checking light fixtures, and making sure the kids at the school he worked for didn't slip on wet tiles. That Monday started like every other. A strong coffee, the same brown lunch bag packed by his youngest daughter, a slow drive through his neighborhood with the old gospel tunes humming through static-speckled speakers. The sun was low but warm, casting that amber glow that made the cracked sidewalks look softer than they were. The world, to Marcus, seemed manageable that day. But something in the air shifted the moment he turned onto Jefferson Avenue. That road, familiar, run down, always lined with litter and whispers of stories no one bothered to finish, had a strange stillness to it. It wasn't the traffic or the buildings or even the smell of burnt oil from the gas station on the corner. It was the girl. She sat on the curb just past the entrance, knees pulled into her chest, body shivering though the temperature didn't call for it. Her face was blotchy, eyes red, one side of her lips slightly swollen. At first, Marcus thought maybe she was just resting or waiting on someone. But as he drove past and saw her again in the rearview mirror, something in him wouldn't let go. His fingers tapped the steering wheel nervously. He'd been taught all his life to mind his business, especially in neighborhoods like this, especially when you look like him. But another voice in him, calmer, older, told him he wouldn't be able to sleep if he left her there like that. He slowed the car, made a U-turn, and pulled into the gas station lot. He parked far enough not to startle her, but close enough to reach her if she needed help. As he stepped out of the car, the air felt heavier, like a pressure pushing down on his chest. His work boots crunched over loose gravel as he approached. His palms were visible at his sides, open, deliberate. "Ma'am," he called out softly, stopping a good distance away. No response. Her eyes were vacant, locked on the horizon like she wasn't even fully present. "Are you okay?" He tried again, keeping his tone low, fatherly. She blinked but said nothing. He glanced around. No one else in sight, just the faded gas pumps, a flickering neon beer sign in the station window, and a world that suddenly felt too quiet. He took a slow step forward, then crouched, keeping space between them, not wanting to spook her. "I can call someone," he said gently. "An ambulance, maybe? The police." Still nothing. She wasn't crying anymore, just staring, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Marcus slowly pulled out his phone, swiped it open, hovered his thumb over the screen. That's when he heard the distant screech of tires, that sharp, urgent squeal of rubber on asphalt that doesn't come from a normal stop. His head turned instinctively. A car, then 2, black and white, lights flashing but no sirens. They turned onto Jefferson like they were hunting something, or someone. Marcus stood up, confused, phone still in hand. He hadn't even called yet. The girl looked up for the first time, fear in her eyes, not at him, but at what was coming. Marcus backed up slightly, keeping his hands up and phone visible. Something didn't feel right. Something in his gut twisted. This wasn't help. This was trouble dressed like help. The kind of trouble he'd spent his whole life trying to avoid. The moment the police car skidded to a stop, time seemed to slow into thick, tense fragments. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. He knew better than that. The instant they jumped out of their vehicles, hands already near their holsters, shouts slicing through the air like blades. He felt it in his bones. They weren't here to help her. They were here for him. One of the officers, a tall one with a clenched jaw and nervous fingers, barked, "Get your hands where I can see them." Even though Marcus's hands were already high, phone still in his right palm, wide open like a book he hoped they'd bother to read. "I called," Marcus said quickly, calmly, heart pounding so hard it nearly drowned his own words. "I called about her. She needs help." But it didn't matter. The tall cop didn't blink. His partner, shorter, stockier, already had his gun unholstered. The way they moved wasn't careful. It was mechanical, fast, like they'd rehearsed this scene 1,000 times in training rooms with cardboard targets. On the ground. "Now," the short one yelled. Now means now. And that was when Marcus realized they didn't see him. They saw a silhouette, a threat, a headline waiting to be buried under paperwork. He knelt slowly, knees hitting the asphalt, hands still raised. His voice cracked as he repeated, "I didn't do anything. I was just trying to help." Behind him, he heard the woman speak for the first time. Her voice panicked, breaking apart like a mirror under pressure. "No, he didn't hurt me. He was helping me." But it was like she was shouting through a wall of bulletproof glass. The officers didn't hear her, or chose not to. One of them rushed forward, grabbed Marcus's arms, twisted them behind his back with a force that sent pain shooting down his shoulders. The metal cuffs bit into his wrists like fangs. His face was pushed against the concrete, hot, gritty, smelling of old gasoline and dust. He tried to breathe, but the weight of the officer's knee on his back crushed his lungs. Around him, the world blurred. The sounds of traffic, the blinking neon signs, the soft sobs of the woman on the curb, all of it faded behind the ringing in his ears. "Check his ID," one officer said. "What's in his pockets?" "Phone, keys, wallet," the other replied. "He's clean. No priors on record." Still the knee stayed. Still no apology. No question. Just assumption. The woman, now on her feet and trembling, approached with her hands up like she was the one under suspicion. "He didn't touch me," she repeated. "He stopped to help. He's the one who called." There was a moment then, a flicker of hesitation on the tall officer's face, a second of realization, but not remorse, not concern, just that slight tilt of the head, like something in the script had changed, and now he didn't know his next line. Marcus was pulled up roughly to his feet, the cuffs still locked, his arms aching. The short officer asked for his name. "Marcus. Marcus Reed," he answered between shallow breaths. "I work at Roosevelt High. I was on my way home." His voice cracked again, not from pain, but from disbelief. How fast it had all turned. How quickly his kindness had been weaponized against him. How the story was written in someone else's handwriting before he ever arrived. The officers exchanged a look, unspoken, and finally, one of them reached down and clicked open the cuffs. Metal released, but the imprint stayed. Deep red lines across his wrists. A silence hung in the air as heavy as the heat. No apology. No explanation. Just an officer mumbling, "You're free to go," like he was letting a guilty man off easy. Marcus didn't move right away. He looked at the woman, her eyes wide with guilt and confusion, and then at the officers. He opened his mouth, but there was nothing left to say. Nothing they would hear. And so he turned, walked back to his car, slowly, like every step carried the weight of something invisible. The whole time, he felt the heat of their gaze on his back. Not relief. Not thanks. Just suspicion, thinning now into dismissal. As if, now that the danger was disproved, the man at the center of it was disposable. The doors of the squad car shut behind him with a sound that felt too final, too cold, like the last word in a language he didn't speak. Marcus sat in the back seat, hands still trembling from the pressure of the cuffs, wrists marked red and raw as though guilt had been carved into them. The car reeked of sweat and old plastic, and the plexiglass barrier between him and the front seat turned the space into a fishbowl of shame. Outside, the officers stood talking to the young woman, their backs to him, heads tilted slightly in that casual posture that didn't belong to men who had just thrown someone face first into the pavement. The woman, to her credit, kept speaking, Marcus could tell by the motion of her hands and the way her body leaned forward, like someone trying to plead with gravity itself. But the officers barely nodded. One of them kept glancing back at Marcus, as if unsure whether to unwrite the story they'd already told themselves. Inside the car, the heat pressed in from all sides. The windows weren't open, and the air conditioner was off. Sweat trickled down Marcus's temple as he tried to piece together what had just happened. Not even 10 minutes ago, he'd been on his way home. Not even 10 minutes ago, he was just a man with a lunch bag, a quiet car ride, and a desire to help. Now he was a suspect, a threat, a problem in need of containment. His phone buzzed in his pocket, muffled by the thin fabric of his slacks, but he couldn't reach it. He didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. His daughter always called when he was running late. Her voice was probably sweet and cheerful, asking if he wanted her to warm up his plate. The thought tightened something deep inside his chest. He could imagine her smile fading as the phone rang and rang without answer. Outside, one of the officers walked back toward the car. Marcus braced himself. The man opened the door but didn't sit. He leaned in, his shadow slicing across Marcus's face. "You're free to go," he said flatly, as if those words could erase what just happened. Marcus blinked. "That's it?" he asked, his voice barely audible, caught somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. The officer hesitated, then reached down and opened the back door. "You're not being charged. Just take it easy, all right?" Marcus stepped out slowly. The sun had shifted in the sky. It was lower now, casting long shadows across the gas station. The woman was gone. The officers were already moving back to their cars, hands near radios, minds already preparing for the next scene, the next call, the next wrong assumption they'd make right in their reports. Marcus stood there for a moment, unmoving, absorbing the silence. His hands trembled at his sides, fingers curling against the phantom sensation of the cuffs. No apology, not even eye contact. He looked down at his shirt, smudged, dusty, stained with a small scrape of blood near the collar. The evidence of his innocence would fade, but the memory would stay sharp, unshakable, like a splinter beneath the skin of his dignity. Slowly, he walked back to his car. It was exactly where he left it. Door still unlocked, engine still warm, sandwich still sitting untouched on the passenger seat. He got in, shut the door, and for a long minute just stared at the wheel. No music, no motion, just the ticking sound of his blinker, still on from when he'd pulled over to help someone who needed it. His hands rested on his thighs, open and sore, as if trying to convince themselves they were no longer bound. The radio finally clicked on mid-sentence, an old preacher's voice declaring, "Not every storm is meant to destroy you. Some come to clear the path." Marcus let the words hang in the air. He didn't know what kind of storm this was, but he knew it had changed something in him, something he wasn't sure he could ever get back. He didn't drive home right away. Marcus just sat there, the engine humming beneath his hands, the sky outside beginning to bruise with the first hints of twilight, that strange hour when the day no longer feels real and the night hasn't yet begun. The steering wheel in front of him felt cold, almost foreign, like something he wasn't supposed to touch anymore. His fingers hovered over it without grip, like they were afraid to take control of anything again. The sweat had dried into his shirt, sticking it to his back, and the dull ache in his shoulders was a reminder that his body hadn't forgotten the force used to press him against that pavement. He stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, not the wrinkles in his forehead or the blood along his jawline, but his eyes. They didn't look like his anymore. There was something in them now, a fog, a warning, a question that didn't have an answer. Cars passed behind him, lights blinking like nothing had happened, like the world had already moved on. But Marcus couldn't. The image of the officer shouting, the guns pointed at his chest, the feeling of rough concrete under his cheek, while his arms were pinned behind his back. It played over and over, not like a memory, but like a scene from a film he didn't audition for. And then there was her, the woman, He wondered where she was now. Was she all right? Was she safe? Did she realize the risk he'd taken just by stopping? Did she know what could have happened if he'd flinched the wrong way, spoken a second too late, or looked just a little less afraid? He exhaled slowly and finally reached for his phone. 27 missed calls. 3 texts from his daughter. The last one just said, "Dad? You okay?" He stared at the screen for a long time, fingers hovering but not typing. How do you explain something like this to your children? How do you say, "I tried to help someone, and I was nearly arrested for it"? Or worse, how do you explain what it means when your kids ask, "Why did they think you were the bad guy?" He pressed the phone to his forehead, shut his eyes. The warmth of the device against his skin was the only thing in the car that felt alive. Outside, a group of teenagers walked past, laughing, their joy echoing through the parking lot. Marcus didn't hate them for it, but the sound felt distant, like it belonged to a different world. After a few more minutes, he finally shifted the car into drive, pulled onto the road, and started driving aimlessly. He didn't want to go home yet. Home meant answers, meant explaining the bruises, meant pretending to be okay. Instead, he drove through neighborhoods where the streets were quiet and the houses looked sleepy. He passed streetlights just beginning to flicker on, past stores with signs flipped to closed, past people walking their dogs like it was just another evening in a city that hadn't turned on them yet. Each red light felt longer than the last. At one, he just sat there, even after it turned green, until the car behind him honked. He waved apologetically and kept going. Eventually, he pulled into a small park, the kind with one rusted swing set and a bench facing a pond that barely moved. He parked the car and stepped out, letting the cool night air wrap around him. He walked slowly, deliberately, to that bench and sat down. The pond reflected a few stars, and the moon cast a soft glow across the grass, but none of it felt comforting. It all felt staged, like nature's apology for what humans refused to fix. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and tried to breathe, but it was the kind of breath that feels heavy, like it has to push past everything inside you before it can escape. He stayed like that for a long time, until his phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "I'm okay," he whispered, before she could even say hello. "I'm coming home." But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't fully true. His body might return. His car might pull into the driveway. But the man who left that morning, the one who thought kindness was simple, that doing the right thing would always be safe, he wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. She hadn't left after all. While Marcus sat alone by the pond, trying to remember how to feel like himself again, the young woman, the one he had stopped to help, was still at the gas station, her voice sharp with urgency as she pushed back against the cold indifference of the officers who thought the situation was already resolved. "You don't understand," she kept repeating, her tone growing more desperate each time. "He didn't touch me. He helped me. He stopped when no one else would." But her words floated in the thick air like smoke, visible but ignored. One of the officers, the one who had knelt beside her earlier pretending to listen, finally turned to her and said, "We heard you. It's been handled." She stared at him in disbelief, her lip trembling, not from fear now, but from the growing realization that what she said didn't matter, that the story had already been written, and it didn't include her truth. But she refused to let it end that way. Pulling out her phone with shaky hands, she began recording, not just the officers standing there like stone monuments to silence, but her own voice. "My name is Emily Hart," she said, her voice quivering but loud, "and I'm making this video because what just happened was wrong. That man, Marcus, he saved me. I was terrified. I had just gotten out of a rideshare where the driver kept following me after I got out. He circled back. I didn't know what to do. I was sitting there, crying alone, and Marcus came up gently, kindly. He asked if I was okay. He called for help. He didn't hurt me. He didn't threaten me. He helped me." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. And they tackled him. They threw him down like a criminal, like a monster, just because of how he looked. Because he was a black man kneeling beside a white woman. She paused then, letting the words settle like ash. That's what happened, and I won't let it be twisted. She uploaded the video within minutes, tagging local news stations, community leaders, civil rights organizations, anyone who might listen. By the time Marcus pulled into his driveway that night, the video had already begun to spread. At first, it was a trickle, a few retweets, a couple of shares, comments from strangers asking, "Is this real?" But then it caught fire, because people knew. They'd seen it before. Different faces, different cities, same script. Within an hour, the video had been picked up by a local journalist who had a reputation for calling out injustice. By midnight, it had made its way to national news aggregators. Marcus didn't know any of this when he stepped into his house. All he knew was that his daughter ran into his arms and held on as if trying to piece him back together. He told her he was okay. He told her not to worry. But his eyes told a different story. One filled with pain he hadn't had time to process yet. One that hadn't found peace. The next morning, a soft knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find a man in a suit, reporter's badge on his chest, camera crew behind him. "Mr. Marcus Avery?" the man asked. "Would you be willing to share your side of what happened?" And just like that, the story that was almost buried under silence had a second chance. Marcus sat down in his living room, camera lights casting warm glows on his tired face, and spoke, not just for himself, but for every person who had been punished for doing the right thing. "I saw someone who needed help," he began, "and I didn't think twice. But they did. The police didn't see a helper. They saw a threat." His voice didn't shake. He was calm, clear. His words were heavy with truth. And for once, someone was listening. By the end of the day, apologies started trickling in. Not from the officers, but from officials, spokespersons, people trying to patch the PR damage. But Marcus didn't care about their statements. What mattered was that the truth was finally out there. The woman had spoken. The world had seen. And though the cuffs had come off hours ago, this was the real release. Not freedom from steel, but freedom from silence. The story didn't end with the viral video or the news crew or even the lukewarm public apology issued in the polished, rehearsed voice of a department spokesperson who never once looked Marcus in the eye. No, what came next was harder, quieter. It was the sound of Marcus waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heartbeat thundering in his chest, because in his dreams he was back on that pavement again. Only this time no one stopped him. It was the sudden, sharp tension he felt every time a siren echoed in the distance, even if it was blocks away. It was the way his neighbors looked at him differently, not with judgment, but with pity, like he was something fragile broken, like the man who had spent his life doing the right things, keeping his head down, working late, raising his daughter to be proud and kind, had somehow cracked beneath the surface. And in truth, maybe he had. Because what they don't tell you about trauma is that it doesn't leave when the headlines fade. It lingers in the way you carry your body, in the cautious glances you give strangers, in the hesitation you feel before offering help again. Marcus began walking more alone, through the park, through downtown, through the same gas station parking lot where everything changed. He didn't walk to escape it. He walked to face it, to study it, to take back the ground that had been stolen from him. Sometimes he saw the same officers from that night. They looked away. He didn't. Meanwhile, Emily, she didn't disappear either. She kept telling the story, not just to the press, but to students at her college, at community forums, on panels where they asked her, "What made you speak out?" And she'd always answer the same way, because silence almost cost a man his life. She and Marcus kept in touch, not close friends, not bonded by anything but that night. But in every message, there was a quiet respect, a shared understanding that no one else quite carried. Marcus was invited to speak too. Churches, town halls, youth centers. He wasn't a polished speaker, and he never claimed to be. But when he talked, people listened. Not because of how he said it, but because of how real it was. "You know what sticks with me?" he once said to a crowd in folding chairs. "It's not the handcuffs. It's not the way they slammed me down. It's the moment I realized they never saw me. They didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate. They just decided who I was. And once they did, it didn't matter what I said or did." That line stayed with people. It was quoted. It was shared. It became a reminder of what's at stake when perception becomes policy. And over time, something strange began to happen. He wasn't just the man from the video anymore. He became a symbol. Not a hero. Not a martyr. Just a man who did the right thing and paid the price for it. And lived to tell the truth. And that, somehow, resonated deeper than outrage or tragedy. It struck at the heart of what so many felt, but didn't have the words for. 1 year later, on the anniversary of that night, Marcus returned to the same curb where Emily had once sat. He brought a single rose, laid it on the sidewalk, and stood in silence. Not in mourning, but in defiance, in remembrance, in quiet strength. A local filmmaker had reached out, asking to document his story. He said yes, not because he wanted the attention, but because stories like his so often go untold unless someone decides they matter. And now he knew his did. So when people ask him now, "Are you okay? Really okay?" he never lies. He says, "Some days are better than others, but I'm still here, still standing, still speaking." And maybe that's the real ending. Not justice, not closure, but survival, with truth intact. With dignity bruised but not broken, with a voice that refuses to be silenced, no matter how loud the world gets. Because sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is simply live. This story isn't just about what happened that night. It's about what keeps happening every day, to people who are just trying to do the right thing. If this moved you, don't just scroll past. Like, share, and subscribe, because some stories need to be heard. And this was one of them.